Oh, there. Great. Thank you all for joining us today. We're in that Back to Basics webinar series, but for the next several episodes, I don't know if these are episodes, we're actually going to be focusing on our year-end information. So if you have been receiving emails from us, every single email should be linked or have a link to the year-end newsletter. If you've reviewed it, you've probably read a little bit about the HFWA already. If you haven't had a chance to yet, there's some information about the HFWA in there. So you can take a look if you need a little bit more information after this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We've actually had, I guess let me do a little bit more housekeeping. Marika, if you could let everybody in while I'm doing my spiel, I'd appreciate it. Please keep yourself on mute so we can eliminate any background noise and just have a clear presentation for everybody. If you have a question, Marika and I both have our chat boxes open. And we have Rebecca here, and she's awesome at answering questions as well. So if you have questions, interrupt with those at any time through chat, and we'll try to address as many of them as possible. Thank you, Rebecca. So yeah, if you just open up your little chat icon and make sure you pop into there, that would be great. This is being recorded. These slides that we have up on the screen will be shared afterwards. So you'll have all of this content to review yourself later. I don't think I've missed anything else, but we're going to keep moving forward. So today, HFWA and the Colorado PHEL. So let's talk a little bit more about what these acronyms are. The HFWA is actually a legislation that is Colorado specific. So we've seen a lot of COVID related law that came out at the federal level, which is great. But all of them have expired at this point. So we had the FFCRA in 2020, and then we had ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, that we saw in 2021, and that did expire at the end of September. So we'll talk a little bit about all of those overlapping things a little bit later, but the first piece of the HFWA is actually the Colorado ESPSL, which is we're not going to spend a lot of time on because it actually expired in 2020 as well. So it was effective July 15th through December of 2020. And really all it did was the FFCRA was not applicable to certain industries for offering COVID-related pay. In Colorado, they didn't like that. They said, no, if the FFCRA exempted you for some reason, you are no longer exempt. All Colorado employers will provide paid leave for COVID. But again, that's in the past, so we're not going to spend any more time talking about it. Today, we're going to focus on the PHEL, which is that public health emergency leave. And that is new legislation just for the state of Colorado, but it doesn't have an expiration date on it. Anytime a new public health emergency pops up, this is going to come into play for us. So we will continue to see this public health emergency leave, hopefully not for a very long time again, but we'll continue to see that take effect and affect payroll in Colorado. And then we have the PSST, which is actually paid sick and safe time. A lot of us don't think of PSST, we just consider this HFWA. This is the Healthy Families and Workplace Act. This is that continued paid leave for sick, and it's not COVID specific, and it's not limited to any public health emergency. This is just paid leave that any Colorado employer must offer to its Colorado employees. This was released in 2 different phases. If you had 16 or more employees, then you were required to start offering this accrual and this paid time off for designated sick reasons as of January 1st in 2021. Now, if you had 15 or fewer employees, you didn't have to start offering this. They gave small employers a little time to build up the reserves before they were required to offer this. But if you have 15 or fewer employees starting in January of 2022, we're coming right up on it. Now you're going to have to offer this paid leave accrual and paid time off for sick reasons in the state of Colorado. So let's dive into this a little bit deeper. The Colorado PHEL is 2 weeks. We've been talking about it, or we hear it a lot as 80 hours. Really, it's 2 weeks. So if you are a full-time employee, 40 hours a week, 2 weeks is 80 hours. That's the required, I think of it as a bucket. So you have to fill your employee's bucket with this public health emergency leave. It's not an accrual, it's just a full bucket to your employees when they need it for COVID-related reasons. If you have an employee who is part-time, then maybe they only work 20 hours a week. So 2 weeks at 20 hours a week is 40 hours. So you would offer that part-time employee 40 hours of this PHEL leave. Now this is Colorado specific again. And it does not come with a tax reimbursement. So the Colorado government can't say the federal government is going to reimburse you for your taxes. It doesn't have that kind of power. But they can say all Colorado employers are required to offer this leave. This has remained pretty much the same as when it was originally released. One addition that was made to it earlier this year was that now if an employee is taking time off to get one of their vaccine shots, so whether it's the booster or whatever it is, if they are getting their vaccination or recovering from their vaccination, that is also now included in this public health emergency leave reason. We did get a question from Tracy. Is this for employers that have more than 15 employees? The public health emergency leave is all Colorado employers. There is no distinction between 15 or more or less. This is just you offer this COVID-related leave, this public health emergency leave to your employees. It's a one time per public health emergency. So it got confusing because the federal government had the FFCRA, which was January to December of 2020. And then we had ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, which was March to September of 2021. The federal government put time frames on their legislation. Colorado did not. They have an expiration date, I put air quotes around that, of 4 weeks after the public health emergency is declared over. That's when this leave is expired. It got really confusing again earlier this year. Polis declared that the public health emergency of COVID was actually over in the state of Colorado several weeks ago at this point, probably months at this point. But he, again, doesn't have that power. We have to wait for the federal government to tell us that the public health emergency is over. So once we hear from the federal government that COVID is over, at that point, we start counting our 4 weeks out, and that's when this public health emergency leave for COVID will expire. Okay, documentation can only be requested after an employee is gone for more than 4 consecutive days. So as soon as an employee comes to you and says that they need to take COVID-related leave, you immediately grant that. If they're gone for longer than 4 consecutive working days, at that point, you can reach out and ask for which reason, because there's 5 reasons, and we'll get to that on the next slide, why an employee can use COVID-related leave. And you can ask for a projected end date to that if they're quarantining, and then who was the one who told them to quarantine, or the doctor who maybe diagnosed them as COVID positive. It's after those 4 days that you can request that information. Now, storing that information must be kept separate and apart from an employee's payroll affecting documentation. So you cannot penalize an employee for taking COVID-related leave. If they can prove that you fired them after they took COVID leave and it was because they took COVID leave, then you could be liable as the employer. Casey,
I'd like to answer this. I'd like to answer this question for Casey. Casey, hi, just because I know you and I know your company. That is what your company decided to do in relation Colorado PHEL and HFWA. So that was advised to you by your attorney. So that's why you guys decided to do 32 hours for PHEL. That is not the law doesn't require you to do 32. That was what was decided based on the law and based on your conversations with your company and your attorney.
And PHEL is not a distinct number of hours required to offer. It is 2 weeks of paid leave. Thank you, Marika. Okay, talking just a little bit about the overlap with the FFCRA and ARPA. So the FFCRA actually required paid leave from the federal level and offered a tax credit for that paid leave. So in 2020, that lined up exactly right with what Colorado was offering. Like you were required as an employer to offer this leave. In 2021, it gets a little bit more muddled because ARPA didn't require that you offered leave from the federal level. But if you did offer the leave, then you would get a tax reimbursement. But in the state of Colorado, it was not voluntary for you to offer that COVID leave. And what all this really means is this is new legislation, and some of it's temporary, and some of it is permanent, some of it's federal, some of it's state. We're all waiting to see how this is going to be flushed out because the courts will actually define how this will be carried forward. So if you have been using federal tax reimbursements for your Colorado required COVID leave, that's a very common way to interpret the law. We're all waiting to see what the final ruling on that will be. And as we find out more, we will share that with you. If you have questions specifically about that, we're happy to have an additional conversation with you, send you to Michael Santos, send you to any other HR certified professionals that we know. And then again, we will continue to be watching the news to see how this is playing out. And we are starting to get some more questions. So Val asked, okay. Yes, Val, 4 weeks after the public health emergency is declared over at the federal level is when the Colorado PHEL will expire. So federally, COVID has not been deemed over. So we're all still just waiting to see when that will be. And Marika had already answered that question too. So thank you. And we're going to keep going. I'm going to move now into the uses for public health emergency leave. Just a really quick overview. You'll have the slide to refer to afterwards. If you're seeking a diagnosis, so if you've gotten a COVID test and you're waiting to see if it's positive or negative, you can be paid for this COVID-related leave. If you're required to be isolating because of contact with somebody who did test positive, that's a COVID-related reason. If your business shut down where you work, you can offer this leave. And you will notice that vaccination on item 2, that is now officially part of the uses of Colorado PHEL. If you are taking care of a dependent who is testing positive or getting tested or experiencing symptoms or required to quarantine, that can be a reason. Or if just the school or their child care of a dependent did have to close because of exposure or whatever, if childcare or daycare closed because of a COVID-related reason, and now you have to stay home to take care of your child, your dependent, then that is actually a COVID-related reason. So again, just real brief overview. Marika, do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, if you continue to have questions for PHEL, please just indicate that that's the legislation that you're asking about, because now we're going to move on to paid sick and safe time, which is what most of us are just referring to this as the HFWA. So this is HFWA. What we're in layman's term, we're going to talk about the accruals and the continued paid leave required by Colorado employers. So again, phase 1, if you had 16 or more employees then you are required to be offering this accrual in this year since January of 2021. If you have 15 or fewer, or really it's just now all employers in the state of Colorado are required to offer this leave beginning January of 2022. You have just a few options. So it is 1 hour of leave for every 30 hours worked that you're accruing up to 48 hours. So it's capped per employee at 48 hours of sick leave. And this is if you have at least one employee in the state of Colorado. If you have an existing PTO plan that is at least this generous, then you can typically take a look at that and make some adjustments and make sure that you're in compliance with this law. I will say one of the most common adjustments that we've seen employers have to make to their current PTO plan is removing like the probationary period. So this is as soon as an hour is accrued, that hour is available to an employee to be able to request off. A lot of the times we'll see employers in their handbook, they would have after 90 days, you can start using sick time, or after 6 months. You have to eliminate that stipulation in order to be in compliance with HFWA. Okay, so you have two options for offering this. You can either grant all 48 hours as of January 1st, or you can set it up based on the designated accrual, which again is 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. You can't exclude overtime or other sick hours, like any not worked paid time for employees. That doesn't add to this accrual of the 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. Again, this is more about 6 days worth of time. So if you have a part-time employee and you're doing you're filling the bucket as of January 1st, you can actually base that, instead of 48 hours, you can base it off of what would this part-time employee normally work in the course of 6 days. If you're doing the accrual, it's a lot simpler because it's just going to base the accrued time on the hours worked. In our software, we can support either of these options, let us know. That's what's really in the newsletters. Let us know if you have not set this up already and you would like to be in compliance. You fill out this form, you give us some really basic details, and then we can build this for you and track this time off for you.
Can I include something in there? Just because I think the question has come up a few times, like, why didn't we just do this? And then the reason is as we're showing on the screen, you get to make some choices within the law as the company. So we can't make those choices for you. We can't just automatically do this. There are companies who have decided to track this outside of our software. So we need you to tell us that you want to track this within our software. We're happy to do it. We just will have some questions to ask you. If you want to track it outside of the software, that is totally fine and up to you. That's why these things are just not automatically applied to your account, because we need your input on it.
Thank you, Marika. Again, in the year-end newsletter, there's a little bit of information about it, and there's actually a link to the form that you can fill out and give to us. If you would like us to send you the form additionally, please just send us a quick email and we can get that over to you. So again, an employee can accrue up to 48 hours within a year, within that 12-month period. They can use up to 48 hours, and anything that is unused will carry over into the next year. I don't know how complicated we want to get right now, but there are some scenarios with maybe an employee accrued 48 hours in 2021, sorry. They accrued 48 hours in 2021. They didn't use any, but maybe they get sick the first week of January in 2022 and need to use all 48 hours. When they come back to work, they'll begin to accrue up to that cap again of 48 hours. But because they've already used 48 hours of paid HFWA leave in the first week of January of 2022, even though they're accruing it, they won't get to use that again until the next year. Now, as the employer, you can be more generous than the minimum requirements of HFWA, but that is your decision. Okay, is the emergency leave reset at the beginning of the year, or is it a total of 2 weeks per emergency? Tracy, it is a total of 2 weeks per emergency. HFWA, this paid sick and safe time, this 48-hour accrual, that resets every year. The public health emergency resets every public health emergency. I know all of this is clear
and
as
just
mud.
to say that in another way, ARPA, FFCRA, that was all, well, ARPA and Colorado PHEL, that's the same 80 hours. It's not 80 hours for ARPA and 80 hours for Colorado PHEL. We did do a webinar on how to track that within the system when ARPA was going on. So we talked about, so you may have already been tracking that and using that, but they're not, again, it's still only 80 hours only, or up to 2 weeks, whether you paid it under ARPA or under Colorado PHEL. I hope I said that in a way that was understandable, but it's all very confusing.
Clarification. Yes. It is, yes. Okay. So the accrual, again, 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. You can earn up to 48 hours per year. Employees can use up to 48 hours per year, and anything unused up to 48 hours can be carried over. Again, you can be more generous if you would like to. Just make sure that this is immediately available to employees. Again, as soon as they have 1 hour, they can use that 1 hour. And then it is paid at their same regular hourly rate. Okay. Use of this is, I could give you the history on this, but I'm not going to. So the use of this is really about any reason an employee would need to take sick time, right? Whether they have a mental or physical injury or illness that they want to, they need to take preventative action on. I need to go and see my regular doctor. I need to go and have a treatment. I need to go for a checkup. Those are considered preventative steps, preventative measures, and so that is covered under this HFWA. If they're maybe been assigned or diagnosed, I don't know the correct terminology here, but a doctor has prescribed a certain treatment plan to ensure that maybe you're pre-diabetic. So here are the steps that you need to take in order to try and not become diabetic. The time that they need to take away from work in order to follow that medical diagnosis, those preventative care treatment plan, that can all fall under this HFWA. So Healthy Family and Workplace Act was originally, this has actually been established for many, many years, and originally was a domestic abuse and a domestic violence act protection for employees. So that language is still in here. If you have an employee who needs to step away because of some kind of physical or harassment, then that is also protected leave and use for this HFWA. It is also not only taking that leave for myself, or if I need to take that time off in order to support a family member or a dependent for any of those same reasons. So that is the use of the HFWA. There's also, again, the dependent's regular care facility is shut down for a particular reason, and I need to stay home because my daughter's school was closed today, right? So that is all of HFWA. Again, if you don't have it set up yet, please contact us so that we can get you going on it. We're not requiring you to be in compliance. We're just providing you all of the information, and then you can make the choice to be in compliance or not with your own company. And are there any questions before I hand this over to Marika? She is actually going to jump into the cloud service view. So if you have been using or want to start using the accrual tracking in system, you can actually let your employees have access to making requests for time off in the system. They can see what their current balance is, how much they can take off, and all of this. So Not seeing any questions come through. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Marika actually show you what all of this looks like in system. And I'm sorry, there was a question that came in. Is there a way to check is we in compliance, or do we just need to reach out? Yeah, Kyle, go ahead and give us a call and we'll take a look at your company's accruals specifically, and we can have that conversation one-on-one. So just our main line, any of us are able to help you out there.
There's also a question from Ronnie. Ronnie, these slides will be available to you after this. Manon will send it out in an email as a follow-up.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. If more questions come in, even if it's not about what I'm sharing, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get them as much as possible. I'm only going to spend about 5 minutes so we can be really good stewards of your time today. But here I'm showing on my screen, we've got the cloud service view or adaptive employee experience. You might hear us say, or employee self-service, employee portal. This is your employee view. So as we're talking about all these leaves and including vacation, PTO, any type of leave that you're offering your employees, we do have options within the system. So not only can we track them, employees can take time or request time off within the system. This requesting of time off or viewing of their time off balances can be available to you, even if you aren't using our time tracking. So that's very important. You can use it whether or not you're clocking in our system or not. And of course, if you are, you'll have this as well. So on here,
sorry, Marika, that brings up a great point. There isn't an additional cost. There's no additional cost to get this set up or to make this available.
Right, and that's when she's specifically the time off, seeing time off balances, requesting time. Right. If you want to have them punch in the system or track time, that is an additional cost. So within there, the time off is in here. They can view this on their computer, on their tablet, on their phone, wherever they are. So if I go ahead and click on my time off option, I will see what is given to me. These are all the items that me as the employee, I can see. It gives me visually, what I have taken, what I have remaining based on those items. You can see Colorado PHEL, HFWA, all those nice items. And then I can also see any upcoming time off that I have already requested, things that are pending, and past time off. So nice little visual there, as well as my holidays that my company pays for. So another thing, if you are paying for holidays and you want those automatically applied, we can look at how we can put holidays into the system using our time system. And it's a nice little note of what is available to the employees, right? So to take time off, they have a nice little plus button here. It says time off. I can select that. And I then choose what type of time I want off. Now, this list of items might look a little different than my screen before, because some of you have decided that, hey, I don't want an employee to request HFWA. I don't want an employee to request Colorado PHEL because I want to have a conversation with that employee. I want them to come to me and we can talk about it because there are specific reasons that that leave can be taken. So that sometimes will be more of a on you guys on the administrative side of deciding which time off to apply that to. You can absolutely have employees request time off through there. Just know that you may have to adjust that if it doesn't fall within the realm of the HFWA or the PSST. Those two are interchangeable, or the Colorado PHEL. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to choose just to show hourly vacation. It'll show me what I have available. As I make my choices, maybe I'm making it for a couple days, it'll show me visually. I can do a start time, and I can say how many hours per day. I can make notes as needed within that box. When I do submit this, notice I have put in, what is available initially, and then what is available after the time off request. So it's showing these items. It's giving them information, a lot of good information to the employee. They would hit submit. Upon that submission, that goes to whoever you designate, the manager. Maybe it goes to you. And I can actually show you when I go over here as a manager, the items I can see. Here's my time off. It's highlighted. I've got 4 of them. I can select that, see the people in my list, and I can make these choices, these designations based on what do they need. I get to see what's available after the request, the dates, the times, their notes, and I can make those items and if I want to approve it or reject it, I can do so. I can approve or reject. I have some examples on here: assigned supervisor, organization supervisor, remember we've done webinars on this about how you can utilize those different approvals in the system. So if you have questions about that, if you need different approvals or you need a supervisor and a manager to approve, those are items and solutions that we can provide in the system. Once I do make a selection, I can then go ahead and process it. And that then flows into their time. So it says this person, if it's a paid earning, it'll just automatically pay them when payroll is done. So really cool solution for those items, puts that information down to the employee, trackable. And if you need to make an adjustment or change it, the manager, if you need to, manager, supervisor, or the administrator can make those adjustments on that. All right, time off. Does that make sense? Are we good? Questions on that? If not, we can go. I see there's some chat, some items in the chat we may need to address.
Yes, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And I'm sorry if you have already said this, I was reading questions, so you might have already said this, but after the time off is requested, then the manager, a client user can go in and approve whether that's going to be added to an employee's time card and decrementing their balance or not. So just because the employee requests the time doesn't mean they automatically get it without review. Our system is great for making sure that nobody has too much power. Okay. So, Lori, I hope I answered your question. If an employee has already used 80 hours under FFCRA, do we need to give them another 80 hours under PHEL? So FFCRA was from 2020. The start time of, really we have to take a look at per employee to see when the time was requested off. Was it before or after the Colorado PHEL was initiated? Any time off before PHEL and under the FFCRA, that doesn't apply to Colorado PHL. Starting when PHEL began, that was a new 80 hours. So if somebody took 20 hours under FFCRA before Colorado PHEL began, then those 20 hours don't automatically apply to PHEL. So that employee might get up to 100 hours if that's what their timeline looked at. Let's have a conversation about each employee. Linda asks a really, really tough question. Do we have to apply PHEL hours before HFWA for their time? This is one of those items that we're kind of waiting for the courts to make a clear decision on. Depending on who you ask to interpret the law, we're seeing some different answers. The conservative answer is to use HFWA before PHEL. But again, that's just a conservative interpretation of the law at this point in time. One thing that is clear, that if you had HFWA, and this really doesn't apply in this situation, but if you had an employee who had maybe 20 hours in their sick bucket, an employer could look at that and be like, okay, well, I'm just required to bump them up to 2 weeks. So if it's a full-time employee, up to the 80 hours. So really, you're just providing 60 hours of additional HIF or PHEL to the 20 hours that they already had in their bucket. That is again, not the most conservative interpretation of the law. It's really you trying to do the best that you can for your employees. Colorado tends to favor employees over employers when making decisions in the court of law. So consult a labor law attorney, consult a certified HR professional to see how you want to apply these rulings in your business. And we're really all just doing the best that we can until we have a better definition and a better interpretation or new interpretation of this legislation. Again, it's all brand new to everybody, so we're all just figuring it out. The best thing that I can say in any HR person, I think the best thing is consistency. Don't be more lenient with one employee than you are with another employee, and track everything. Why did you make that decision, and did you keep that decision consistent for all of your employees? I think Rebecca answered Ronnie's question, how do you know what kind of time they have requested? And it is, they choose what kind of time that they are pulling from: vacation, sick, PHEL, HFWA. And then when you receive the time off request, it will clearly say which bucket the employee is making that time off from. I did a lot of talking today, and usually that's not the case. Usually Marika drives these. So any questions for me? Any questions for Marika? Any questions for Rebecca before we wrap up today? Again, this is a portion of this is in your year-end newsletter, and there are links to the form to set up HFWA in that newsletter. Go ahead, and any email that you've been receiving from Autopaychecks starting at the end of October had a link to that newsletter, has a link to the HFWA form. If that's not, it's lost in your email somewhere and you just want another copy of it, reach out. We're happy to send it again. Just let us know. Thank you all for your time today. I hope this was helpful. Our next webinar is going to be in 2 weeks. So today is the 18th. Our next one will be December 2nd. And we're going to continue running through those year-end newsletter items. Our next topic is going to be about bonus payrolls, how you fill out the form, how you're making those decisions, whether to gross up or net pay, and when you want to get those scheduled. So you're certainly welcome to send those in earlier, ask any questions about bonus payrolls earlier, but that's what our next webinar topic will be. So thank you again for today. And thanks for participating. I love to see questions.
Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.